Soviet Union was exactly the same in 1991 as it was in 1917. Yeah, they built a lot of stuff. They stole a lot of stuff. There's a great book called East minus West equals zero, which means like it goes into how much the Soviet Union stole from the West in order to build. But yeah, they built a whole bunch of stuff. They sure did. Slave labor can build you a whole bunch of stuff. Labor that you point machine guns at and shoot people who don't do what you want, you can build a whole bunch of stuff. What is the value of that in the long run? Not that much. And you can't even tell what the value is because there's no price system, there's no price mechanism, because there's no free market, there's no stock market to tell you what things are worth. So if we're sitting here in the squalid grade two massive, did the Soviets build stuff? Yeah, they built stuff. And so did the ancient Egyptians, and so did the Nazis. So what? The question is the morality of how it was done.
May I respond? Are you going to let me respond without interrupting now? All right, I will proceed. If the question is not whether or not they actually achieved anything economically, but whether or not they violated human rights in order to do it, you're defending a system that is very, very guilty of mass death and killing far, far more than we can imagine. I mean, where has free trade economics been implemented and not resulted in mass death, I would ask you, right? The British Empire imposed free markets at the point of a gun on China with the Opium Wars, right? They forced Britain to join the British Empire free trade system. That's why Hong Kong is now part of or was separate because of the British Empire and such, which you defend. The result was mass famines and death. Stop interrupting me, please.
Okay, but
there was the Chinese famine. I'm sorry, will you stop interrupting me? I didn't interrupt you. Now stop interrupting. All right? You can talk about the mass famine of 1876 to 1879. 9 to 13 million people dead because the British Empire wouldn't let them develop their own economy. You could talk about the mass famine of 1928 to 1930. 3 to 10 million people dead. Why? Because they couldn't have a central government, because the fields that should have been growing food were growing opium poppies. This is the disaster, right? All over the world we've seen capitalism result in mass death. In India, mass famines created by free trade. 4 to 5 million people dead in 1866 in the Orissa famine. The Indian famines of 1896 to 1879, 2 million dead at the hands of the British Empire, right? You talk about the Great Famine in Ireland, 1845 to 1849, where the Whig Party imposed free market policies on the Irish people at the barrel of a gun, colonialism, and the result was millions of deaths, right? Capitalism has killed millions of people. You know, King Leopold of Belgium, he worked to death 10 to 15 million people in the Congo so he could make rubber profits from their labor. And, World War I, 20 million people sent to their deaths so that the capitalists could carve up the developing world for themselves in colonial empires. The whole reason that communism even emerged was in response to the fact that British free market Adam Smith capitalism was causing mass death and suffering around the world, holding back economic development, keeping the developing world poor. And so countries around the world chose to break out of that system, organize and control their own economies, and they had great successes. China, before the communists came to power, was deeply poor. Now China, with a state-controlled, centrally planned economy, is the second largest economy on earth. The Soviet Union lifted itself up, as you have acknowledged. So, if we're going to play that game of who's violated human rights, I can point you to many capitalist governments, most of whom are in line with your free trade ideas, that have committed mass atrocities. So I'm not seeing the link.
No, I get that you're not seeing the link because you don't understand my argument. So the idea that you can impose a free market at the point of a gun through imperialism is antithetical to market voluntarism, to market anarchy, to true free markets. True free markets rely on two basic principles. The first is the non-initiation of force, and the second is a respect for property rights. So I dislike the Soviet Union because it was a communist dictatorship, and of course it was an empire. It was, with this union of Soviet socialist republics, so it was a whole scattering of countries, and of course they tried to expand into other countries, into North Korea, into North Vietnam, and of course a wide variety of other places. They funded the takeovers in Cuba and Cambodia and other places. So yeah, they were a terrible empire, and the British Empire was a terrible empire. the British Empire was a violation of the free market and of the free trade, because they forced people to become sailors, and they forced people, the average British citizen suffered enormously under the British Empire, and it was, of course, highly profitable for the fascistic state corporations that had the union of state power so that they could outsource the protection of their invasions economically of other countries. They could outsource that to the hapless and helpless British taxpayer, who was dragged onto ships at the point of a sword and died of scurvy more often than he even died from war. So the idea that somehow you get me into the corner where I'm defending the British Empire while opposing is ridiculous. You and I are on the same side. As you view the British Empire, so do I view the Russian Empire. As you view British dictatorial policies where resources were stripped and markets were interrupted and people were enslaved both financially and at the point of a gun to be sailors and soldiers to defend the profits of the corporations united with the power of the state, yeah, we're on the same side. I don't know what this straw man is that somehow you said I've defended the British Empire. No, the British Empire is a monstrous violation of personal and political liberties.
All right, now I will respond. I've seen you defend the British Empire all over YouTube. I watched a lot of your material, but I'm not going to quibble with you said this or that. I'm not here to argue about you. I'm here to argue about facts. You said earlier the Soviet Union stole a lot of stuff. You referred to the Soviet Union as an empire. The Soviet Union bankrupted itself developing the countries that were aligned with it. Huge amounts of money went into building infrastructure in places like Afghanistan, in places like, Angola, in places like Libya. I mean, the Soviet Union spent loads and loads of its money industrializing and developing the countries it was aligned with. It wasn't plundering them. When the British Empire went to India, it burned all the textile mills and forced them to import their cloth from Britain. The United States goes around the world blowing up and destroying oil-producing countries and reducing them to chaos. So the world market is forced to buy its oil from the 4 super major oil companies that are closely embedded with the puppet of Western capitalism, Saudi Arabia. But that's all beside the point, because so now you're saying the British Empire wasn't capitalism. You're saying the United States, I assume you're saying the United States, where force was used in order to create the country, force with the slaughter of the Native Americans, force with slavery was used to create it. You're saying none of that counts because force was used. So let me ask you this. Where has real capitalism ever been tried? Right? This is like arguing with an anarcho-communist or something. Show me one place where real capitalism, where no force was used, where everyone just did things voluntarily, was ever tried, right? This is what is constantly said about communists. That's not real socialism. That's not real capitalism. I pointed to you the ugly record of capitalism around the world, and you responded with the old cliche, not real capitalism. So where's real capitalism ever worked?
Define capitalism for me, because we're obviously not using the same terms.
Clearly, I think capitalism has worked around the world in slaughtering millions of people. I think capitalism is the system we live under in the United States right now.
I'm sorry,
you have a different definition.
Could you please define for me capitalism?
Under my understanding, capitalism is an economy where profits are in command. It's, as Frederick Engels said, it's preliminary transformation into capital. Under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Under other systems, we have houses because people need a place to live. Under capitalism, we have houses so landlords and banks can make money, right? Under capitalism, we don't have food because people need something to eat. We have food so that capitalists can make profits from it. Capitalism is a system where the means of production function according to profit. That's my definition. What's yours?
Where the means of production function according to profit, that's capitalism?
Under my understanding.
So then all systems wherein people make more than they spend is capitalism, is that right?
No.
Where there's profit?
No, when profits are in command. When the state is not planning out the economy, when the market and the maximization of profit dictates production, when there's not state central planning, when society and the economy is not organized for the benefit of public good by central planners, but instead organized to make profits for private owners, that's capitalism.